Martians invading New Jersey, satanic cults operating out of suburban daycares, Africanized killer bees swarming the borders, and a computer glitch dropping passenger planes from the sky on New Year's Eve. For 2.5 centuries, Americans have demonstrated a remarkable talent for predicting their own destruction. Yet, year after year, the world stubbornly refuses to end. Sociologists generally divide these events into 2 groups. Mass hysteria describes a psychological phenomenon where mental stress triggers actual physical symptoms within a community. A moral panic is the media-driven, exaggerated reaction to a perceived threat against cultural values. These episodes function as a sociological pressure valve. They provide a structured way for a society to process unmanageable trauma. The process remains consistent across history. A hidden societal stressor finds relief in a folk devil, a scapegoat chosen to carry the collective blame, until a spectacular anticlimax resets the clock. In 1692, the residents of Massachusetts were living through a state of legal and existential limbo. A brutal frontier war was raging nearby, flooding the colony with traumatized refugees, as the local government lacked a formal charter. This pressure manifested in Salem as a physical mass hysteria. Young girls, many of whom had witnessed extreme violence firsthand, began to physically contort, babble, and bark like dogs. The community used the witch as a blank psychological screen. It was a target they could understand, allowing them to project their formless terror of war and political collapse onto a neighbor. By the 19th century, this dread shifted from the supernatural to the mathematical. Preacher William Miller used a literalist interpretation of prophecy to convince tens of thousands of followers that the world would end on October 22, 1844. The ticking clock of a specific date drove Millerites to abandon their crops, sell their livestock, and wait on rooftops for a physical ascension that never came. When the sun rose on October 23rd, the farms were still bare. History records the crushing despondency that followed as the Great Disappointment. Instead of abandoning the panic, many followers simply moved the goalposts. They reinterpreted the failed apocalypse as a spiritual cleansing, showing how a community will often pivot its entire belief system rather than admit a panic was manufactured. The 1930s paired the economic devastation of the Great Depression with the looming threat of another global war. In 1938, Orson Welles used the new immersive power of radio to perform a fictional Martian invasion. Legend holds that his fake news bulletins sent millions of listeners into a state of nationwide hysteria. Historical data reveals a different story. Very few people were actually listening, and there were no verified suicides or hospital admissions. The real moral panic was engineered by the newspaper industry, which wildly exaggerated the public's fear to discredit radio as a news source. During the Cold War, the existential stressor was the atomic bomb. American families were encouraged to normalize apocalyptic dread by building claustrophobic fallout shelters in their backyards. Because people could not fight a nuclear war, they funneled that anxiety toward youth culture. Congressional hearings in the 1950s attempted to link the simple act of reading comic books to juvenile delinquency and communist subversion. This fear of un-American elements became so pervasive that the Cincinnati Reds baseball team temporarily changed their name to the Redlegs just to avoid the linguistic association with communism. Whether the target was a Martian, a comic book, or a team name, the underlying mechanism remained the same, using a scapegoat to make global anxiety feel manageable. The late 20th century introduced rapid technological change and a massive shift in family dynamics as professional daycare became a new reality for millions of working parents. Parents projected their anxieties over these changing family structures onto a new folk devil, the satanic cult. This fueled the satanic panic of the 1980s, which used unsubstantiated rumors of ritual abuse to attack everything from heavy metal music to Dungeons & Dragons. By the 1990s, the dread turned ecological, with killer bees, and technological, with the Y2K computer bug, the belief that a minor coding shortcut would crash global civilization at the turn of the millennium. The clock struck midnight in 2000, and once again, the apocalypse dissolved. The computers worked, and the bees never arrived, revealing the threat to be an illusion. 250 years of scares reveal a highly functional coping mechanism. The human mind struggles to confront abstract concepts. You cannot punch shifting cultural values. You cannot physically battle a Cold War or a global technological overhaul. Projecting those massive anxieties onto a manageable target provides a sense of control. You can't stop a nuclear arms race, but you can ban a comic book. You can't freeze the march of technology, but you can hoard water for Y2K. The world never actually ends. It simply resets. The next time the nation falls into a frenzy over a new trend or technology, we must recognize the pattern and ask, what real-world anxiety are we actually trying to distract ourselves from?